reminded that that clock is off. So we're starting late, and I apologize. It's really good to have all of you here. For those who came to the last meeting, thank you for coming back. For everyone who's here tonight, I'm really excited to have you. Perhaps we could start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Lord
Jesus, you speak to us today as you spoke to holy men and women who have gone before us. In every age and in our own time, you call to us and say, renew my church. Pour out the gift of your Holy Spirit upon us, and so enable us to hear you clearly, to listen to each other attentively, to imagine our future boldly, to discern your direction wisely, to persevere in your holy will courageously, to stay together in charity, to surrender our own plans readily, to embrace the greater good, to hand on your gifts to future generations. May we remain in holy company of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the apostles and all the saints. May their example and presence inspire us with patient confidence in the work of your grace. We ask this of you who live and reign with the Father in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Just a couple of preliminary comments. We're approaching this whole discernment from a position of strength for our parish for several reasons. The scenarios we'll be discussing tonight were put together before we got the results of the facility reports, which means, was it 2 months ago? At least. 3 teams came out to analyze all 5 parishes, all the buildings, the property, the inside, the outside, to measure everything off, and then to tell us exactly the condition of each of our plants and what in the future will need to be done. And it's over a 5-year plan with specifically how much those things will cost. We're the only one of the 5 churches that the overall appraisal was better than the average. And that was all spelled out in detail. We're the parish of the 5 for which there's the least amount of money that's going to be required to straighten things out. And that also includes adding air conditioning to this building. So it isn't all about fixing up, it's about improvement. Also, we're a shrine. So this cardinal designated only this church as a shrine of All Saints just 5 years ago, November 1st. So it's canonically established. And you'll notice on your page that it's been recommended that in any of the scenarios that whatever is come up with, it needs to take into account the present and the role of the Shrine of All Saints. Oh, but also, we'll be talking about our finances a little later. Right now, there's 2 things. As I'm sure you know, COVID is hitting all of us, including the Archdiocese. And the average parish around here has lost about 40% of what it used to take in during the year. In our case, we lost the St. Joseph Tableton auction, which was one of the big ones. We have had one raffle, and we'll try to have another. Everyone has generously responded during this time. Anyone using envelopes, those envelopes are coming in, and that never stopped. People are dropping them in the mailbox, and we're deeply grateful. But a lot of the loose change and the dollars that used to go into the collection, we don't see them. And so the end result is about 40% less. We're okay so far, but we don't know how long COVID is going to go on. Now, what we have, some of you know, is a cushion called the endowment. About 2 years before I got here, 20 years ago, Art Lush and his wife passed away, and half of their wealth went to the Methodist Church and to our parish. And until recently, that endowment, which was put away as an endowment, accumulated up to $1 million. Now, because of COVID, we lost 100,000 of that million. But the rest of that is still there. And it's a cushion. We're the only parish of the 5 that has that cushion. We have never had to tap into it. What we've been able to do is use the interest. We used it to put these stained glass windows in. We used it for a number of other expenses, but the endowment has been left alone, and it's still there. So financially, we're okay at the moment, and we'll be able to move along for a while. But again, we don't know how long COVID is going to be, what effect that will have on Christmas. It will surely have an effect. We haven't figured out what to do with Christmas yet. We're thinking about it. Anyway, those are some things to consider. When we're looking at the scenarios also, there's a couple of things. When I first came here 20 years ago, our parish was part of the deanery on the other side of the expressway. And I said to Bishop Conway, to me that doesn't make any sense. We were the only parish on that side of the expressway that had half of its town on this side of the expressway. And also our children were going to St. John Rebuff at the time. Because west of Waukegan, people are going to St. Martha's, they're going to St. Isaac Dope, they're going to St. John Rebuff and other places. But I said, why should the parish be separated that way in Morton Grove? So Bishop Conway said, we don't usually do that, but he said, you're right, it makes sense. So for these 20 years, we've been looking west and working more with this side of the deanery, and we've been connected with St. Isaac's and St. John's. And St. Isaac's and we, as you know, have worked through collaboration for a number of years. So I just mentioned that as background when we're discussing the scenarios. And the other thing is it's just useful to be aware that the ecclesiologies, or let's say the manner of doing church, are not exactly the same in every parish. And especially, for example, St. Lambert's has a Latin Mass once a month. At the 7 o'clock Mass once a month, the pastor says Mass facing the wall. Well, that's okay. That's not saying it's a bad thing. But it's not a style we're accustomed to right here. And to kind of put all that together, and there isn't that in St. Peter's, but there's a manner of doing church that is a little closer to St. Lambert's. And again, it's not that any one way of doing church is bad or good. We're all good. We're worshiping the Lord in our Catholic ways. But it's a different kind of approach. So I just mentioned that as background. I think you'll pick up more as you're listening to Lori to do a presentation, and you'll be able to look at a comparison of the facilities reports, and then we need your input.
Hi, everyone. Some of you might not have been here for the first meeting, so we're going to try to do a little bit of an overview from some of the slides from the first meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about Renew My Church. We're going to get into the scenarios, and we will show you some maps with the geography so that you can actually see how the geography works. What our goal is for tonight is to get your feedback. So we want you to really sit and ponder some of the groupings with some of the information that we're giving you. You know, how many parishioners, and it's all based on October count. So we talked about October count before. Every parish in the Archdiocese has to keep track of everyone at every Mass for the first 4 Sundays in October. All of that data is sent down to the Archdiocese of Chicago, and every parish is evaluated based on their October count. So we'll be starting that. This is our first weekend in October. But, you know, and we'll be looking at revenue, excluding any rental revenue. So we can't count what we're getting from the Greek school or what we might be getting from some of the other miscellaneous groups. And then we'll be looking at some of the other issues with the facilities inspection that Father Dennis just talked about. So we need you to complete a feedback form. I think you were given one when you came in. There's a basket up here. If you feel like filling it out tonight while you're here, that'd be great. Drop it in the basket. We're going to be compiling information. No one's going to see it except for your grouping team. You don't have to put your name on it. It can remain completely anonymous. And we just want to make sure that we're getting your honest input about how you feel with the different scenarios, what the strengths are, what the challenges are, where you think St. Martha would be better suited. And then the grouping team will compile all of those. In fact, Debbie's going to do that for us, so Debbie's also going to be taking notes here tonight. We're going to compile all of that, and then we have our next meeting with the group, all of the parishes, the 5 parishes, on October 15th. St. Martha is hosting that meeting, so it'll be the first time that some of the people from some of the other churches will have come to St. Martha's, and they're going to get a chance to see the shrine. The shrine is one of the things that we have to take into consideration. How important is the shrine to us, to Morton Grove, to the mission? You know, with the shrine, we're already evangelizing, and that's exactly, that's part of the mission. You know, we're living our lives as witnesses. And, you know, Father Dennis can talk about it. He's taken hundreds of people through here with confirmation classes and Catholic school retreats and seminarians, and people have come from all over the world. So we're already sharing our faith. I mean, that's one of the things that the shrine's important for. So we'll give you an update on that as we go along. So some ground rules again, you know, because we are being recorded. So we want to model respect, collaboration, and openness to the Spirit speaking through us. Anybody that's got any cell phones, if you could turn them off, that would be great, or silence them. Again, please don't take any pictures or video recordings, because we're already doing that, and we will put it up on the web again, so other people who have not come tonight will be able to see them. And once again, if you don't recognize faces in here, that might be the media that might have decided to come and crash our meeting tonight. Point them out so we can throw them out. So we want you guys to feel comfortable. This is our family meeting. We're going to, as we go through the scenarios, we're going to give everybody to the middle again, and just take a few minutes, think about what you want to say, and get up and let us know how you feel. Prayer. Okay, so why are we here? We are called. Where we were. So we talked about this again last time. Over the last 50 or 60 years in the Archdiocese of Chicago, culture was more Christian, open to faith, and enabled people to live out their faith and recognize religion as an avenue for spiritual life. We talked about it last time. You know, 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, when you introduced yourself to somebody, it was, oh, I'm from St. Martha. And everybody kind of knew where you lived and how you lived your life. It was our community. The culture today is more secular. People live out, it dissuades people from living out their faith. They've become ambivalent about their faith. And it undermines religion as an avenue for spiritual life. So some of the things that have pushed the whole Renew My Church process is the declines. We all know it. We've all talked about it. Mass attendance in the Archdiocese has decreased 27% in 20 years. So we went from 600,000 people going to Mass every weekend down to 300,000 people, you know, and it varies. And we've all talked about how faith has even fallen apart in our families. You know, kids grow up, they leave, they don't come back. Across the United States, 2 in 5 children baptized are not confirmed. So parents are getting their kids baptized, and maybe they're hanging around someplace to make First Communion, but they're not even making confirmation. So we're losing the kids way early in life. 85% of children confirmed stop practicing their faith by age 21. So again, in order for us to survive, we have to find a way to connect that gap, to close that gap. You know, what do we need to do to bring the kids back? Alice?
Is that in the country, or is that in this archdiocese?
The Archdiocese. Yeah, these are all talking about the Archdiocese of Chicago. But anecdotally, we've heard that from everybody we talk to, and it's not just Catholic. You know, Father Dennis has had conversations with the Muslims, and the Muslims are saying the same thing, and the Jews are saying the same thing, and the Lutherans are saying the same thing. it's just a secular society and the way everybody is just kind of falling away. One of the other things that just really surprises me, too, is that the birth rate is down 25 or 26%. So people are having less children. And so, we're not going to have as many people to fill the seats in the churches. So that's another thing. So our response, we're called by Christ to make disciples. We are all disciples. You are disciples. You care. You're here. You love. You support St. Martha in so many ways. You are St. Martha disciples. We have to make more. Building communities. We're a parish community. We're a part of the Morton Grove community. We are an extended family. So, we're already living that life, but how do we make it more real, more recognized? And then inspiring witnesses, just living God's plan. How do we encourage other people to be good and to do good? The Renew My Church journey is spiritual and structural. So how do we rekindle that spiritual love? And how do we ensure that the parishes in the future have the resources to support the mission? So you're going to hear those two words all the time. So think about spiritual renewal and structural renewal. The proposed scenarios were developed accounting for data such as demographics, mass attendance, financial and facility conditions. The scenarios reflect input from Archdiocese staff, and we've had some questions tonight. These 5 scenarios were initially created by the Archdiocese. They were vetted with the pastors. They have been vetted now with the leadership teams, and now we're bringing them to you. Nothing's final. They are not etched in stone. And through your input, we're going to try to eliminate or change some of the scenarios. And the Archdiocese is open to hearing from you. If you come up with another scenario that you think makes sense, please bring it to the floor, because that's the kind of information we want to take. And again, no decisions have been made. So some of the quantitative measures that we need to take a look at is there's a minimum of 800 parishioners. So again, the October count. Our October count has been over 1,000 for the past 20 years. So St. Martha's October count has been stable over the last 20 years. Operating revenue, excluding lease income, of $750,000 to support ministry and operations. School enrollment doesn't apply to us, except St. John Rebuff is part of our grouping, and we have to consider, what do we do or how do we help St. John Rebuff? They don't have 240 at the moment, and lots of Catholic schools are struggling right now because of COVID. So, if we're going to be in a grouping or if we're going to be grouped with St. John Rebuff, we have to think about how we help them. They're going to be looking for increased enrollment. The other 4 parishes have no schools. So our kids, we already have kids that are going to St. John Rebuff, and we are subsidizing. We have a couple of kids. We have one child over at St. Mary of the Woods. St. Isaac Jogues is sending their kids to St. John Rebuff. St. Peter's closed, and some of their kids are going over to St. Paul of the Cross and St. John Rebuff. So there's not a whole lot that we can do to influence their enrollment, except for as new families come in. If they're looking for Catholic schools, we would encourage them to go take a look at St. John Rebuff. Capital repairs and investments must be affordable and prudent. We have a slide in a few minutes we'll look at where we have some totals for, Father Dennis talked about, for each one of the parishes in the grouping that go over 7 years. So you can take a look at the numbers and see. All of the principles, quantitative and qualitative, need to be taken into account. And sometimes they conflict. So sometimes it might not make sense to stay in one particular place or make sense for one particular grouping, but there might be another reason why it does make sense. So we ask you to all consider the challenges, the benefits and the challenges. So 2 words as we go into the scenarios. First word is parish. Tonight we're going to be talking only about parishes. So in the parish equals the people, the community, the organization. So we're going to be talking about the 5 parishes, irregardless of what the buildings are. So it's just the parishes. We haven't yet gotten into the whole idea of church and where church might be. So the churches are the buildings. So again, we'll talk, we already talked about this. The initial scenarios that we're putting on the table are intended to build communities, inspire witness, make disciples. So, and again, they're from the Archdiocese with some vetting, and they're intended to create some idea and some thinking. We want you to consider all of those as you're thinking about your input. And between the meetings, think about the scenarios and think about it from a head and heart perspective. You might think something makes sense from your head intellectually, but yet your heart, we know your heart stays here. We know that. But think about it in a way that maybe you can find some common ground or find some commonality maybe between your head and your heart. Not going to go through all of this. The slides will show, there's 5 scenarios. The 5 scenarios show different groupings of the parishes. So in each one of them, there's a couple of scenarios where we have 3 parishes. So maybe St. Isaac Jogues and St. John the Buff come together, and St. Martha Stands Alone, and St. Lambert and St. Peter come together. In each one of those scenarios, we have 5 parishes today. We would be going to 3 parishes. As those parish changes are done, the parishes come together. One of the churches is going to be designated as the Parish Church, and that church will be responsible for managing that organization. So they'll keep all the sacrament books, they'll take care of personnel and payroll and all the back office stuff that gets done. They will also take on all of the assets and all of the debt of the churches that might be combining. So everything St. Martha has, if St. Martha goes into a grouping with St. John the Buff, everything we have then becomes ours together. The Archdiocese asked the grouping to consider the importance in each scenario of the Shrine of All Saints. So how does the Shrine of All Saints support that particular grouping? And the school, St. John the Buff School, will be considered as the parish school for the entire grouping. So that stays. Okay, so here's what we look like today. You can see that side. St. Lambert is the blue. St. Peter's is in the middle in the green. Can you see that, or do we need to turn some lights off maybe? Mother Dennis, maybe?
Turn off the lights.
Turn off the side lights maybe? Yeah, it's hard to see.
I'll turn off the ceiling light.
Further ceiling lights. That'd be great. Thank you. So St. Peter's is the middle in green. St. Martha is the kind of pink color. St. John the Buff has the long blue slice that goes across the bottom. And then St. Isaac Jogues is the other orange color up at the top. Is that better? Okay, super. So now you can see the color. You can see the slice of geography that we cover. We've got the expressway, we've got some railroad tracks, we've got a lot of forest preserve in the St. Martha, St. John the Buff area. And so this gives you an idea. The other thing that I want you to pay attention to, or at least be aware of, is there are a lot of other churches with schools in the area. So, that's just also something to think about. Any questions about this? Okay, so here's scenario 1. In scenario 1, we go from 5 to 3. St. Peter and St. Lambert come together, the Skokie parishes. St. Isaac Jogues and St. Martha come together, and St. John Brebeuf stays on its own. So we need to take a look at what does that mean? How does that work? And now I know it's really hard for you to see all of your notes because I can't see mine. But we would go from 5 to 3, and you can kind of see how that geography works. Skokie stays together. Combining St. Martha and St. Isaac Jogues would be nice because we're already working together and we bring Morton Grove together as a community. And then St. John Brebeuf is by itself. So that's the first scenario, 5 into 3. The second scenario is 5 into 2. So it would be St. Martha, St. Peter, and St. Lambert coming together. And then St. John Brebeuf and St. Isaac Jogues would come together. So this one gets a little, I think, unwieldy. When we turn the lights back on, we can look at the numbers. The St. Martha, St. Peter, St. Lambert seems like a big piece of geography to manage. The third scenario, again, is 5 parishes into 2. So again, St. Isaac Jogues and St. Martha come together. But in this one, St. John Brebeuf merges with St. Peter and St. Lambert. So you can see in this particular scenario how big the geography would be, how much it would cover with St. John Brebeuf coming into grouping with the Skokie parishes. That could be a challenge. Scenario 4, again, is 2 parishes, but a different configuration. So St. Peter and St. Lambert would come together. Again, the 2 Skokie parishes, east side of the expressway, they would come together, they would bring Skokie together. And then St. Martha, St. Isaac Jogues, and St. John Brebeuf. So of the 3 parishes with St. Isaac Jogues, St. John Brebeuf, St. Martha, there would be 1 parish church. And again, we're not talking about buildings yet. We're not talking about who's a worship site or who stays open to do masses, or we're just talking about how the parishes might come together. Scenario 5 is 4 parishes, St. Isaac Jogues and St. Martha as 1, and then St. John Brebeuf, St. Peter, and St. Lambert would all be standalone parishes. This scenario doesn't really accomplish any of what the Renew My Church objectives seem to be. You know, everybody, it looks like everything is staying status quo, and status quo is just maintenance mode. So it doesn't free up anything, any extra revenue to do any kind of remodeling and rebuilding for evangelization. So that scenario doesn't quite make sense, but it's here. The 5 were presented to the pastors, the 5 were presented to us, and we want you to see what the scenarios were. Okay, so here's the site inspections. Father Dennis talked about those a little earlier. Back in July and August, site inspections were done for each one of the parishes. 3 inspectors came out, an architectural inspector, a mechanical inspector, so the mechanical inspector came to look at heating and air conditioning and plumbing and all of that stuff. And then an interior inspector. They compiled reports, they did pictures, they wrote reports. It's been a very long process trying to get everything from the firm, but we finally got everything. Oh, I didn't change this. Okay, all right. Well, thanks. Okay. All right, so we do have numbers for all of them. So St. Martha, from immediate to, maybe I opened the wrong presentation, from immediately to 2026, so 7 years. St. Isaac Jogues St. Martha has $602,000, almost $603,000 worth of work that needs to be done, of which $180,000 is putting air conditioning and upgraded electrical power here in the big church. So they're adding that in there, saying that it's something that we would likely consider in the new scenario. St. Peter has $1.4 million in work that needs to be done, and you can see that the numbers are pretty spread out, with the exception of, they're saying 2020, but it's obviously not going to happen in 2020. But to the tune of, $450,000 worth of work that needs to be done pretty quick. St. Lambert's is $726,800. Again, they've got some work that needs to be done soon. So $300,000 in, let's say, 2021 now, because we're at the end of 2020. St. John Rebuff has almost $1.5 million, a little over $1.5 million. They have quite a bit of work that will need to be done pretty quick. And most of that is the windows in the big church. They've been having lots and lots and lots of trouble with the windows in the big church. St. Isaac Jogues has $1,231,000 in renovation costs, and most of that, $800,000 of it, is removing and replacing the flat roofs on the school. The flat roofs on the school are in bad shape. I've been there now since 2012, and all we've been doing is patching, and they need to be torn off and replaced. So you can see from looking at this that St. Martha is in a pretty strong position from a facilities perspective in terms of the work that would need to be done to keep the campus safe and usable for the next 7 years. Yes, ma'am.
Something the matter with my vision? I don't see anything under St. Isaac Jogues.
No, something's not wrong with your vision, Alice. I did the numbers, I put them in here, but I think I'm using an old copy of this presentation because I did it today, but it's not in here.
But
Okay, sorry. But again, it's $1,231,900. And I can certainly give everybody the breakdown. It's $163,000 the first year, and then $3,700 the second, $587,000 the third. But all total it's $1 million, a little over $1.2 million for St. Isaac Jogues. Okay, so can we get lights, please? Mary's gone, Father Dennis. So take a minute. The handouts, the scenario handouts that we gave you on the back side of it, it gives you some information about the October count and what's been happening with it. So what are your initial reactions to the first 5? What was unclear? Do you have any questions, comments, concerns? And what information is missing for you? Paul?
Has the Archdiocese or anyone done demographic studies of this area? I mean, it would be like looking into the crystal ball, but looking at, say, Skokie and most of Skokie, which are the 2 parishes, it seems that in our area are becoming more Muslim. And I don't know really what's going on in Rebuff or Isaac Jogues, if they're holding the same demographics or if they're changing. We do know, you did point out that there's less Catholics being born.
Correct.
I don't know how that figures into it.
Yeah, we have gotten some information from the Village of Morton Grove. Not a whole lot, but again, it's just Morton Grove. We haven't gotten a lot of information from any of the other areas. And we've asked, so I don't know what the Archdiocese really has. But in Morton Grove, I think the last thing I saw is 40% of the people in Morton Grove were not born here. So, that only talks about Morton Grove. But over the last 20 years, St. Martha has remained, it's remarkable. Their October count has been over 1,000 every year for the last 20 years. So there is a core group of Catholics here. And we have seen more and more, I'm sure for those of you that live in the area, we have seen more and more young families come in. Liz has 150 people, 150 kids in religious ed. So it's the greatest number we've had in a very long time. She had 140 kids last year. So people are coming to St. Martha.
Is she pulling them from any other parishes?
We don't know that. I'm not sure. I couldn't say that for sure.
Some are.
Some are? Okay. So,
Because population-wise, this whole area, we're sort of landlocked, and Morton Grove's population hasn't budged much in 40, 50 years.
that's true. But Morton Grove has done a great job of putting up community housing, condos and townhouses, so that as people are aging out of single-family homes, they're able to age into something that's less maintenance.
Woodlands has been a blessing for us.
Absolutely. So they've done a great job. And then having the train station here, has been a big blessing too, because now we've got more of the commuters coming into Morton Grove as well.
Something that we've been reflecting on during my years here. The good thing, as you know, is if parishioners become empty nesters, they don't have to move out of the parish because of the condos. And the question was, but will all of those Catholic households be replaced with Catholic households? Probably not. And when I first came in, there were hardly any children here. So it's been really exciting the last couple of years because there are a number of families with a lot of little kids, which in the parish council we've been saying, we got to do something for them because they're coming. And that bingo in January was remarkable for the amount of parent involvement. And it has a lot to do with people being glad to work with Liz, but a lot of those kids are from here. And if that keeps going, that could be really good for us.
Alice?
Is the CCD combined with Isaac Joe?
No, not right now. Religious Ed at Isaac Jogues has 35 kids right now, I think.
They just combined for the sacraments?
Just this.
Just confirmation.
Just for confirmation. St. Isaac Jogues and St. Martha have been doing confirmation together for the last 6 or 7 years. Mm-hmm. And actually, last year we did confirmation with St. Peter's. St. Peter's joined us.
We're supposed to.
It got knocked out by COVID. Yeah.
Correct. And the priests were given the faculties to do the confirmations.
Brendan had one.
Yep.
My name is Brendan Williams, I'm Parish Church since 2004. I think it might be helpful if we actually knew what some of the expenses were. You asked for some insights. We know what top line revenue is, but what are the expenses? If you have a parish that has $1 million worth of expenses and $500,000 revenue, definitely don't want to reevaluate it.
Right.
So I'd love some more insight into what's going on in the business or cost, either or margin. So I think that would be an insightful metric or KPI, performance indicator to have for each parish too as well.
Yeah,
I know it's not relevant in the future state because we're going to be reorganizing and consolidating and everything else, but it kind of gives it help. It helps. It's one more data point to help make some more decisions. And I do appreciate bringing up about how many Catholics are in some of these areas too, because we definitely want to make sure we're serving the appropriate area where it's, let's be honest, where most Catholic people are living, because we need to service our audience.
Correct.
That's what it is. I'm sorry. that's where we can actually move the anti-delegation aspect of our religion.
I can, from the expense perspective, I can tell you that they're looking at ordinary operating expenses. So it's salaries, it's utilities, it's lawn maintenance, it's snow removal, it's...
And again, it would be helpful, like, well, what parish is currently underwater, and the Providence, excellent job, as you can tell, but it's not regular basis. But if there's a parent underwater, that would help me make a decision if I were concerned.
Okay.
I'd say that.
We can take that back and take it back to the grouping team and say, like, to
Because
see
it's not necessarily
everybody's...
about how much you get till, it's about
How are you managing your money?
Bringing work and develop our capital base.
Correct. Okay, yeah,
I'm sorry, what I was trying to ask was,
And so, and also, there are a number of non-Catholic Christians that have come in tour groups, Greek, Russian, Orthodox, Chaldean, Assyrian, Armenian, and they all want to come for the saints, for the relics. So, yeah, we're certainly going to underline that because ecumenism is big here.
anybody else? Yep. Take your...
Can possibly, and this is something someone had asked me and I didn't know how to answer, can they close the church and keep the shrine open?
Yes. That's certainly part of...
Take the mic back.
That, yeah, that is certainly part of what could potentially be one of the, when we get to the building and the parish discussions, that's certainly one of the things that could happen.
Okay, so basically we could have
They didn't hear the question.
and a pilgrimage and so forth, and yet the church itself would have to be together with another parish.
Correct. Kathy was asking, can the shrine stay open but not the parish? So, and what would that mean? So the parish would merge with St. Isaac Joe's maybe, but the shrine would stay open as an active shrine. Okay, so we've been discussing we'll leave parish, oh, sorry, Bill.
Kathy, we discussed that in our grouping, that scenario of keeping the shrine open. I have been consistently saying I'm very impartial. I want the shrine to be open as independent because if it is merged with some other parish and the shrine is kept open, we are only looking for a natural death because the decision makers are somewhere else. How much anyone is going to consistently look up for the shrine, I don't know. So we have a conflict of interest over there.
I didn't understand that at all.
Okay. Sorry. For example, if we are merged with a different parish, the pastor is going to be at that parish and not at the shrine. And they're not going, because of the lack of the priest in the diocese, they're not going to assign, maybe for a long term, a priest to stay right in the shrine itself, here, like for the dentist. So what happens is, if we don't have the personnel, plus we don't have the resources to maintain the shrine, how long the shrine will last? Are we not looking for a natural death of the shrine after all this for the dentist is done? So that scenario we discussed already, but I'm of the opinion that if we have to keep the shrine, make shrine as an independent parish, that will give a lasting value for our shrine.
Here, here. That makes sense, Kathy?
Yes and no, that's okay.
Okay.
There's another question over here. Anna.
Hi, Anna.
I was wondering if
question is to financial people, Lori, our business manager, and Bill, our financial gentleman. Can we have another scenario where we are self-sustaining? Do we have the finances to do that? Because the scenarios never gave us that choice of being an independent entity.
Correct. Bill?
I think to talk about that, you have to go back to why we're having this Renew My Church anyway. So you've heard about the decline in attendance, which means less revenue and expenses, particularly for buildings and upkeep stay the same. We also have, we didn't show those slides today, a huge decline in the number of parish priests, archdiocesan priests to pastor. And so when we merge these parishes, and I think the archdiocese would like to get this down to at least 3 parishes, probably 2, and maybe even 1 of the 5. And all the other groupings that are going on all around the archdiocese. If St. Martha's is part of a merger with other parishes, this building will be part of that merger. So we will be part of a new parish that will include people from another parish. They'll probably rename it, as they've done with some other parish mergers. Sacred Heart and St. Philip became Divine Mercy, and there are a number of other renamings. And so we'd be one parish. So we would have, if we're active Catholics in the new parish, as we are here, we will have influence on what happens to the shrine and what happens to that parish. So it's not like all of a sudden we're going to be cut off from the shrine of St. Martha's is part of a grouping with one or more other parishes. Is that fair? So, I'm not worried about losing the shrine because we're going to be in the parish with the shrine here. The shrine is right here. And I think it's an important part. And as I was saying the other day, I was speaking from up there, and even 1 or 2 feet, you get a better sense of the enormity of what's been put together by Father Dennis over the years. It's really quite an extraordinary collection. When you get up a couple of feet, you should stand up here and take a look at it. It's really extraordinary. But we will be part of another, probably renamed parish, if we're part of a grouping with more than one. That's not to say decisions are made that we won't be standalone, but none of the 5 parishes have a lot of excess money. We have some savings, but year in, year out, we're living close to hand to mouth. And without that endowment, we'd be precarious, particularly if we don't get everybody back after the pandemic clears up.
Thing that I just lost as I stood up. Don't get old. Regardless of how we reconfigure, all 5 parishes have been mandated in their scenarios to speak about the presence and the role of the Shrine of All Saints. So the parishes that are not united with us also are supposed to do the same thing. Figure out what ways that's going to be an evangelical tool for them too. And, I don't have any clout on this particular issue, but if we merge with other parishes, my first suggestion would be the new parish should be called All Saints, because all of the All Saints churches in the diocese are now closed.
Another thing that was not brought up is that even if churches merge, that doesn't necessarily mean the merged churches are going to be closed. They can still remain worship sites. So even if we merge with St. Isaac's, depending on how it all goes, we haven't got that far yet about what buildings will remain open, which buildings will be closed. But there's a possibility that St. Martha's
in any of the scenarios, could remain open as a worship site. So we wouldn't need to worry about losing the shrine because it'll be a parish church, even though it won't be St. Martha's, whatever the new name would be, what it would be, but it would be a worship site. Also, Anna, when you were saying, could we make the scenario that's not here? Yes, and the Archdiocese encourages it. If you have an idea that's not one of these 5, go for it. Put it on your feedback form. Also, Lori did kind of indicate that some of these scenarios don't make sense. We decided as a group of the 5 parishes that we wanted our parishes to see all 5 scenarios. However, as a group, we pretty much decided there's 2 of them that are not financially, geographically, or otherwise sound. So when you're looking at these scenarios, look at number 3 and look at number 5. The group has already pretty much decided those are not sustainable. So that leaves you only 3 really to work with. So if you come up, if through divine providence you have some idea that you think is better, maybe leave St. Martin's standalone, maybe have it, whatever you come up with. Please put it on your feedback form. That's what the Archdiocese is looking for.
I think you can hear me. When I look at the map and I see that part of Skokie, I wonder what happened to St. Joan of Arc.
St. Joan of Arc is still open, but they're in a different grouping. So they're not included in our grouping. The only 2 parishes from Skokie that are included in our grouping is Lambert and St. Peter. We don't know why Lambert and Peter were separated from Joan of Arc, but Joan of Arc is separate. Joan of Arc is technically Evanston, correct?
I suggested the same thing, Jim. I said they belong together, the 3 of them, but technically they are Evanston. So they've been going with Evanston churches.
Anybody else? Okay. So, what we use as input for the considerations. The leadership team is using all of the summer discoveries, which have been very limited because of COVID. So some of the summer discoveries are still going on. We went to a meeting at St. Lambert's. We got to see the St. Lambert campus. We are hosting a meeting here on October 15th for the groupings. And then there are 2 more sessions available, so I suspect one will be at St. Peter's and one will be at St. Isaac Jogues. We've gone to a number of them at St. John Above. So we're trying to get a chance to see the campuses. We strongly encourage you, can't find a mass here at St. Martha, try a different church. Go see a different church. Go see what it's like. I don't want you not to come to St. Martha, but we want you to go take a look and see what's being offered elsewhere. We're also talking about the groupings realities. Take a look at the October count. Take a look at the revenue. Take a look at, the amount of money that it's going to take to make sure that the facilities serve the future. Keep in mind the foundational principles. So we're building communities, evangelizing, and working the mission. And what do we know from our lived experiences? So think about what's special about St. Martha. Why do you love coming here? Why do you feel, there's been a lot of conversation about the shrine. What can you put down on paper that's so really important about coming here, and how do you feel about the shrine? They want to know about our reality and our lived experiences here. So the groupings realities, we're working on information that reports the status and reveals our trends. So one of the things that, getting back to Paul's question, population and ethnic demographic changes in the areas. We've already talked about mass attendance and sacramental records. The church and school operating income and expenses, which was brought up. School and religious ed enrollments. We talked about the fact that religious ed is way up and school enrollment right now is down. Building conditions and affordability, we talked about that. So these are the realities that you need to think about as you're doing your feedback forms. And we talked about questions. So the feedback forms, think about the scenarios, answer the questions, turn in your feedback forms. If you have time and you want to fill them out tonight, there's a basket up here, feel free. Otherwise, fill them out, drop them off at the rectory, email them, bring them to Mass on the weekend, but we need to have all of your feedback forms back by October 11th. We're getting together on the 12th. We've got to compile all of this information so that we can present it at our meeting on the 15th. So the more feedback we get from you guys, the better off we're going to be. So the scenarios, which best addresses the needs of our grouping. So again, if you look at, keep all that criteria in mind. Which scenario least addresses? So Peggy was already talking about scenario 5, how scenario 5 doesn't really accomplish anything because all it does is leave everybody hanging out there. And, again, we stay in maintenance mode. We have no extra money to do any extra ministry, to hire a youth director, to do anything else. Doesn't accomplish anything. So keep those in mind. And then what do you consider the biggest potential challenge? We're talking about demographics, and, diversity for us is a strength. So is diversity across the grouping as much a strength? We have lots and lots and lots of people coming together here at St. Martha. And every one of the parishes, St. John Rubuff has a huge Polish population, and St. Peter's has a huge Cuban population. St. Lambert's has a huge Cuban population. So there are a lot of other ethnic groups that are coming into some of the other parishes. St. Isaac Jogues is very similar to St. Martha. Lots of, very healthy Filipinos, very healthy Indian community. So there's lots of different ethnicity to take into consideration. And then the unrealistic demands on the clergy, and Bill was talking about that. We have to address the fact that over the next several years, 200 priests are going to be retiring. 200 of our priests are over now, over 70, and a couple over 80. So, 64 or something from the last slide that I remember. So we have to think about what are we going to do, and vocations are just way down. So we can't, from a pastoral perspective, we can't support all the churches that we have today. So we have to find a different way. Folks. We're trying to figure out how to get Mass back here in the big church, because we know everybody wants to come back to the big church. So, but I just want you to not worry about the doors closing and nobody telling you what's going on. And if no one else has any questions, I'm done. Alice.
You knew that was going to happen, didn't you?
That's all right.
So you're doing an October count. You're doing an October count during COVID-19. Is everybody aware of this?
Yeah, but so is everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all doing it. And
So it's just you're comparing.
correct.
Okay.
We're all comparing the effect of COVID on the archdiocese as a total.
Okay. And the other thing is, going to other churches on a Sunday is not all that easy because you have to register, presumably.
Correct. Yeah, all of the churches have a registration system, but all of the churches are also handling things the same way we are. If you go and there's space, they will let you in. Okay.
Is it like on October? Because
Oh, yeah, that's a good, yeah, Debbie said maybe not visit in October.
Don't do it
We
during
don't want to
October.
lose the October count. We don't want you to be padding somebody else's October count and cutting into ours.
All of the figures that we're working with, we're all mindful of COVID, but the finances and everything else are from last year. They're all pre-COVID, because we can't really make judgments just based on COVID. What I was going to share with you is that every time a parish closes, it kind of blows a hole in the collective subconscious of everybody in the diocese. When I was ordained, there were nearly 500 parishes, and we grew up identifying by neighborhood, as Lori said, which parish you're from. And that for the older folks like me, that doesn't go away. But we've had ways of closing parishes, because among all the reasons that we've given, but also the decreasing number of priests. And I put it in the bulletin, but just to re-underline, part of the reason we're having this discussion is that within 9 years, we will be down to 200 diocesan priests, because dinosaurs like me will be retired. And when I was ordained, there were about 38 ordained in 1973. And right now, we're averaging less than 10 every year. And I know that there are other reasons why we could have more priests, but we have to deal with what we have. And so if we don't reduce the number of parishes, we won't be able to have pastors for these churches. So there's that reality that we have to deal with too. I want to thank Lori for these 2 presentations, because she did a very good job.
Anybody else? There aren't any more scheduled parish meetings, but we can certainly do another one as we move down the road and come up with the, what the grouping recommendations are after we get through that process. So I'm sure Father Dennis would be open to another parish meeting.
Yeah, we want to keep everyone as in the loop as possible. And even though they don't have one scheduled, especially during COVID, it seems like a good idea to have another meeting as we move along the process, and we'll just do that.
Rosario?